So I work in an amazing professional mixing and mastering studio with top-notch acoustics and beautiful monitoring. But I still use headphones a lot, and I've been searching for a solution that emulates the sound of this studio in something mobile that I can take with me. A studio in the palm of your hand, if you will. But despite trying so many different solutions, I've never found anything that even comes remotely close until now. Getting headphones to sound like speakers is something people have been trying to do since the first geek with a roll of tape strapped 2 transducers to his head. I've tried every solution imaginable, and they all just are disappointing, or limited, or downright inconvenient in some way. But I've finally found a solution that doesn't suck. In fact, it's the closest thing I've ever heard to what it feels like to sit right here in this chair. In this video, I'm going to show you what I've been using up until this point and why I couldn't wait to move away from it. I'm going to talk about the 4 different things that make for a realistic and convincing studio speaker experience in headphones. And then I'm going to show you the new solution and why I switched. I want to thank our sponsor, IK Multimedia, on this one for supporting this YouTube channel and making it possible for me to create more videos like this for you guys. Up until this point, I've been using an Apogee Groove headphone DAC as the main piece of my mobile setup. And it's a USB bus-powered, high-quality headphone converter. It's been great, but it outputs to a 1/8" stereo headphone port. And that sucks for me because all of my professional headphones are 1/4". So I need to use a stupid adapter, and it's just this extra thing that's sitting on the desk, causing clutter when I just want a minimal, streamlined mobile setup. That's just on the hardware side of things. Then once we get over to the computer, I've been running SonarWorks Sound ID Reference, which is a great platform if you're doing headphone calibration and you want to do a house curve, but it's an extra app that you have to buy and install and ensure that it's running every time you want to work. Then I'm using an additional app called Can Opener, which I'm using for crossfeed, which is essential to be able to create a realistic stereo soundstage like speakers. That's a lot of stuff. And that's why this approach sucks. It was only a matter of time before somebody really smart took a look at that cobbled together approach and said, hey, we can do better. Let's make something streamlined and all in one. And they did. The first thing we need to have in place to have headphones sound more like speakers is a realistic, balanced target curve. The human auditory system isn't linear, so if it receives the same sound pressure level at all frequencies, which is what you'd call a flat frequency response, then actually some of those frequencies are going to sound louder or quieter. They're going to sound out of balance. And so there was a lot of research that was done into this, a lot of quality research actually by Sean Olive, to create something called the Harman response curves, which I know a lot of you will be familiar with. And they were an attempt to be able to inform the audio industry of how to create a frequency response that would actually sound psychoacoustically, the perception of it would be balanced. The issue with that is when you get into engineering music. So they built a really good target curve that will appeal to a wide range of people because in their target group, in their test groups, they had people that were young people, old people, experienced listeners, unexperienced listeners, people that liked jazz and people that liked hip hop. And they had people that were just kind of this random mix of a general population. And that works great to base your research on that type of test group if you're a headphone manufacturer that's trying to build a jack of all trades headphone that has the widest appeal to the most number of people. But it doesn't work for me as an engineer. It's been proven over and over again in research, a lot of it referenced by Floyd Toole in his book Sound Reproduction, that engineers who are critically listening to and evaluating mixing and mastering music have different requirements than general purpose listeners. And so for me, I need a target curve that's been built by engineers for the purposes of engineering music. And that target curve happens to look different than the Harman response curves. For example, there's less bass in it. It's close, but there's substantial and significant differences. The next thing you need is crossfeed, or what's sometimes called crosstalk. And that's simply having some of the sound and information from the left channel reach the right side, and some from the right side reach the left side, because that's what happens when you're in front of a pair of speakers. So you're sitting in front of a pair of speakers that are in an equilateral triangle. Sound from the right speaker bends around your head and reaches the left ear, and vice versa. But when you're in headphones, you have sound coming in at a discrete 90-degree angle. Nothing from the right channel reaches the left ear, and nothing from the left channel reaches the right ear. And that results in a really unnaturally wide-sounding stereo field with a hole in the center. So how do you emulate this in headphones? Well, you create some bleed between the channels, which is what crossfeed is. But it's more complicated than that because you also have interaction of sound with your body. That's something that's called anatomical transfer function. So when you're in front of speakers, you have sound that actually hits your chest and reflects up. And this sound that is coming from the right channel and reaching your left ear is bending around your head. And as it bends around your head, there's an effect called head shadowing. So it creates a timing difference, it creates an amplitude or a level difference, and it creates a frequency or a spectral difference. Because as the sound is bending around the head, it's actually changing all three of those things. So a really good, high quality, realistic algorithm is going to emulate all of those factors, not just simple crossfeed. The next thing you need to have in place is high quality room and speaker modeling. So in attempts to be able to make headphones sound more like a real studio, typically they'll go in and they'll measure the acoustic response of that room. So they can take that sonic signature unique to that studio and they can put it into the algorithm. And that's great if you model a really good studio and good speakers. But I'll tell you, I have looked at so many of the solutions that have attempted to do this, and I'm absolutely shocked at the rooms that they're actually modeling. And I think it's just because, I'm a guy who designs and builds music studios and control rooms, and I've trained in acoustics. And so I look at some of the rooms that they're choosing to model, and I just spot they're bad rooms. They're rooms that are just violating some of the most basic principles of proper room setup. And I would never want to work in these rooms. A lot of times when you're checking your mix on headphones or using headphones, you're doing it because the room that you're in isn't a great acoustic environment. So why would I want to use a solution that's modeling another room that has bad acoustical compromises? If you take a look at rooms that are designed by the top acousticians in the world, John Brand, Thomas from Northward Acoustics, West Lascaux Design Group, Newell Acoustical Engineering, I've never once seen a company that has modeled one of those rooms. Those are the rooms that I would want to model. And you can model any room. Why not model a room that's actually like a $2-3 million room where everything's been done right? And then it comes to speakers. It's nice to be able to emulate all kinds of different speakers, and that's great. But you would want to emulate really good speakers, right? So it's nice to have a selection of speakers to be able to flip through, also to be able to model like mobile phones and laptops. That's definitely another best practice that I would look for in the algorithm. The final thing you need to have in place if you want to emulate speakers in headphones is a really, really tight decay. So headphones themselves have a super short decay, and that can sound unnatural because in a normal room, the sound takes a little while to die down. The amount of time that it takes for the sound to drop down to an imperceptible level in a room is called its decay time. And in emulating that, a lot of companies that are making these algorithms end up swamping the room sound with way too much ambience. And to me, it sounds nothing like being in a really nice control room. In a control room like this, where I have a ton of acoustic treatment, it has a bit of decay, but it's like 100, 150 milliseconds. It's very tight. But when I spool up a lot of these algorithms, they're swampy. They sound like a living room. And to me, I would never mix. In fact, I could not mix effectively in a room like that. So you're going to look for the decay. You want that decay to be really, really nice. And ideally, if you want to, you can switch it off. You can monitor with it on and you can monitor with it off. So what I'm using now is this, the ARC On-Ear by IK Multimedia. What is this? So it's a high-quality headphone DAC, digital analog converter. It's your interface. It's also a high-quality and very powerful headphone amp, and it can drive even high-impedance professional headphones. I have many different headphones. I have almost the entire lineup from Odyssey. I've tried them all with this. It can drive all of them brilliantly. It USB bus powers, and so there's no additional power source necessary. It actually has an internal battery, so you can use it even without a computer. We'll get to that in a sec. Critically, it has a 1/4-inch output, so I can plug my professional headphones into it directly without using fussy adapters. And it has DSP on board that does all of those things that we just talked about that are necessary to be able to have a realistic and convincing stereo speaker experience on headphones. It will calibrate your headphones to a target curve that was designed by engineers for engineers, so it's different and more accurate for engineering than the Harman response curves. It has the ability to simulate a room with ambience that you can switch on and off. It has the ability to emulate a wide range of different speakers and sound sources, and it does that all in a completely standalone box. So on paper, that is exactly what I was trying to get with that spaghetti mess of other equipment and apps and technology. And here it is in one little tiny form factor. So for me, it was a huge win. So now let's go into the different features and how this thing ticks. So to set this up, you're going to use the Arc On-Ear app. Note that you do not need to have this running after you've set the unit up. All of the settings and the processing is saved and happens on the Arc On-Ear hardware. So you just use the app to configure the unit to start it up, okay? So the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna browse the headphones that you have. At the time of this video, when they've just launched this product, they already have 250 headphones, and they're gonna be adding to that all of the time. So you can see you have all the manufacturers here. You have the type of headphones, over-ear, circumaural. You have impedance. You have the ability to click a star and favorite them. And I'm using the Odyssey MM500s. Those are amazing headphones. They're tuned by Manny Marroquin, the mixer, but they don't sound like speakers on their own because they don't have crossfeed, they don't have the room simulation. So as good as they are, they still don't sound like being in this studio. And that's why this extra app, this extra layer, this extra hardware is needed for a realistic simulation, okay? So we choose the headphones. Then you can go over and enable the calibration right here. Now, the calibration, what that's doing is it's merging the sound of your headphones, the frequency response of your headphones, with their target curve. So IK Multimedia, and a lot of these guys are engineers themselves. They're mix mastering engineers or music producers, and they did their own extensive in-house research over a long period of time to come up with their target curve. And it's similar to the Harman curve, but it's more what you would want as an engineer. Like, for example, it has a bit less bass. It's not as hyped in the bass, okay? So what the calibration is gonna do, it says flat, but it's not actually SPL flat. That's a very important distinction to get. What it's doing is it's creating a psychoacoustically balanced target curve. So it's gonna sound flat, it's gonna sound balanced to you, but it's not flat if you actually looked at the curve in terms of SPL, okay? So it's gonna take whichever individual headphones you have, and it's going to merge those to the target curve, so you're getting a nice psychoacoustically flat frequency response that will correct for magnitude differences in your headphones, okay? You can take this, and if you subjectively want a warmer or a brighter sound, you can actually take this parameter and drag this up or down for a brighter or a darker sound. For me, I like it right even in the middle. I like it just psychoacoustically balanced, okay? That's what I do. What's this phase align button? Some headphones, namely some more prosumer, cheaper headphones, have issues with phase alignment that can cause the crossfeed or the room simulation to sound not as realistic. And so you can flip that on and A/B that and see if it makes an improvement. For me, with the caliber of headphones that I'm using from Odyssey, the phase alignment is totally not necessary, so I leave it off. You can see up here in the display what the correction is doing. You can see blue is the pre and orange is the post, okay? And then you can see the next thing we have is the studio simulation, and this is where we get to that beautiful crossfeed, okay? So we turn that on, and you can see that it's now going to simulate the 60-degree equilateral triangle that you would normally be in for speakers. You can take it and you can increase, you can accentuate the width, you can narrow the width, but personally, I don't do that. As a music studio guy, you only ever set your speakers up in a proper equilateral triangle, and I would never deviate from that. If you go wider than that, it's gonna sound like it has a hole in the center. If you go narrower than that, you're gonna get kind of an LCR effect. The stereo image will collapse and narrow. And so I just don't mess with this. I leave it at exactly 100%. Now, you'll see there's an ambience switch, and I love that. So other room simulations, virtual studio monitoring simulations that I've seen, just have the ability to turn the simulation on or off. And what it's doing is it's bundling together the crossfeed with the room ambience, that extra decay that it's adding. And in many cases, I don't like that extra decay. So I kind of have to take it or leave it with all those things included. Well, not here. I have the ability to do the crossfeed, which is going to give me that nice stereophonic emulation, and I can activate or deactivate the ambience individually. Now let's talk about their ambience. So what they've done here is rather than have a swampy, long decay like a lot of the other algorithms, they've modeled early reflection. So it's a very, very short, tight decay that simulates what you might get in a pretty well-damped room. However, for me, as an engineer, I leave this off because in a proper music studio control room, there are no early reflections, right? There's this concept called an RFZ, which stands for a reflection-free zone, and every boundary around me, except for the back wall, is treated with thick porous absorption, the ceiling and the sidewalls, and they completely suppress these reflections that might come back to me within a very short period of time. And that's necessary to be able to hear clearly what you're working on. Otherwise, these early reflections can have a masking effect. So they can be nice to simulate what it's like listening in a more reflective space, like a bedroom or a living room or something. But for me, I personally leave that preference off when I'm working on mixing music. Next, you have the ability to select virtual speakers. So we can go turn this on, and then you can see you have the ability to select from a whole wide range of speakers. You have studio monitors, you have hi-fi, and then they have their multimedia selection here that can simulate Bluetooth speakers, smartphones, TVs. This looks a lot like an ATC. That looks a lot like a Barefoot. That looks a lot like a KRK. And so you can tell the kind of some of the speakers that they've modeled there, including some of their own. So that can be really neat if you want to emulate the sound of different speakers. For me, oftentimes I'm working with that off because I am working on Neumann KH420s. Maybe they'll emulate those eventually. They don't have them now, but they have deeper bass. They have much more full range bass extension. And so, for example, when you can see, if I switch over to this modeling, you can see it's actually rolling off a lot in the subs. And I like to hear that stuff. So from a personal perspective, I leave that off. But where I will use this feature is in the multimedia area. So I definitely want to listen to what it sounds like on a Bluetooth speaker. I definitely want to listen to what it sounds like on a smartphone. And that's usually what I find I'm going to when I use the virtual speakers feature. Okay. Now, the other thing you can do is you can actually create a trim with an EQ. So you'll notice here, I have the ability to click and there's these parametric EQ points. So if I want to create customize the target curve, if I want to create my own house curve, I can do that here. So you have a full 3-band parametric EQ. You can have the EQ node set to bell or shelving filters. So you can see here, I've actually boosted up the bass a little bit. And again, that just makes this setup sound a little bit more like my room where I have a slight bass lift because my monitors are mounted in the wall. Okay, the next thing is on the top of the ARC on-ear, you actually have these different buttons. So you don't need to have the app running, which is great. You just have hands-on control. You can turn on and off the studio simulation. You can turn on and off the calibration. And then you have an additional programmable function button. And you can see I have mine set. You can set them here to the different things to turn on and off, like dim and mute and whatnot. But I have mine set to mono because oftentimes I want to flip on and off of mono when I'm comparing different mixing moves that I'm doing. So I have mine set to be able to turn mono on and off with the programmable function button. Once you've got everything configured exactly how you want it, on the right-hand side, you can save up to 5 presets. So you can dial in your settings, you can double-click, type in a preset name, hit enter, and boom, it'll save for you. So now let's talk about the rest of the actual hardware unit. We have a USB connection on the back. We have a switch that is for power, but it also can operate the unit on the included battery that we talked about earlier. So this has a battery that will run it for up to 4 hours. Why would you want to do that? Well, it's for scenarios where you're not connected to a computer. You can actually have other audio sources run calibrated audio through this. It has an aux input on the back that's stereo 1/8 inch. So you could take a external mixer, or you could take another DAC and you could plug that into the back, and now you have calibrated audio without any apps running, without any computer even in the equation. Super cool. Aside from the buttons that we talked about on the front, you have a nice big volume knob, and then we have the 1/4-inch headphone output. Let's talk about build quality. And I live in rural Canada. I'm in the woods. We do what we call the moose test, which is if I really needed to, could I knock out a moose with this? If it was like coming at me, maybe if I had a slingshot, I could like stun him a bit. It's pretty well made. It's metal, heavy. I could at least piss him off. I mean, maybe not the best idea, but I think this thing would survive. Going forwards, I know IK Multimedia is going to be adding more headphones to the list of calibrated models, and I've even heard that in the near future, they will likely be offering the ability for you to send in your own headphones to be individually calibrated, so it gets the calibration even tighter and more accurate. Now, I do just want to speak to the sponsorship aspect of this video. Many of you who've been following my channel for the 17 years I've been operating it know that I don't just lightly recommend products, and I'm not recommending different products every week. If you look back, the last time I recommended a headphone DAC, which is anything like this, was 2017, and that was the Apogee Groove, and it's a product that I've been using all the time ever since then. You can see it in a ton of my videos. So I'm replacing it now, and this is my go-to system for using headphones because that previous spaghetti mess of technology I was using was just so inconvenient and more expensive. And I've replaced it. It's been entirely superseded by this one sleek, slimline, standalone box. So big ups to IK Multimedia, our sponsor on this one, and the creator of the Arc On-Ear. Appreciate your support in helping me to create more videos like this on the channel. If you're interested in the Arc On-Ear and you want to check it out, I've dropped a link to it below in the video description. Drop me a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit me up in the comments. I'd love to hear from you what you thought about this video, about the Arc On-Ear and all of this technology. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.